Good evening. My name is Rebecca Bench. It is October 25th, 2021 at 7 p.m. and I am calling this meeting of the Hatfield School Committee to order. The first item on the agenda is public comment. Is there any public comment? Did you write on the paper?
I don't know where the paper is.
Oh, it's right. Sorry.
But I will write on it.
That's fine, just so I can keep track.
This table isn't safe to use, though. So I don't know.
I didn't know what to do.
Gotta be careful with this kind of
I think that's a trick. I think they just don't want anybody to use that table.
Okay. 1 second.
I don't have anybody in the waiting room.
Okay. Thanks.
Turn it on.
Thank you, John.
No problem. Okay. Oh, and I sit in the chair and good to go. All right. John Garrett. I live in Greenfield, Mass. 151 Conway Street. I don't know if you need that for the record as well, but it's still true. I am co-president of the Hatfield Teachers Association, and I just wanted to say thank you for giving me a chance to speak. I know that the MOA is on the agenda this evening. I also recognize, just kind of looking at the table in front of me, that you don't have a full complement of folks. So, we could be here at another meeting where you're working on this. But the reason I mention that is I appreciate the fact that this is on the agenda because it's part of a conversation. And one of the things that's going to be happening this year, as you all know, and I know you're going to an executive session in a little while, is it's a contract year. So one of the things that will make a contract year and negotiations, I think, the most beneficial for the Hatfield community is if we're talking to each other rather than talking past each other. And so the MOA is, in a lot of ways, just codifying what's already happening. And so the school year has been going on for, oh gosh, I don't know, 3 years, 2.5 months, whatever the number might be. And a lot of the practices that are codifying that document exist. So as a mark of, I know that as a mark basically just of talking to the community, the MOA is an excellent move to continue that conversation. To that end, and I haven't discussed this with the administrators here, and so, this may not be a feasible thing, but we would love to, again, continue the conversation and see some of you folks in the school buildings at some point. One of the things that's really easy to do is to, I don't live your life, you don't live my life. It's easy to not see all the things that are going on. And so I think if we have a common understanding of what's going on in our schools, if we have a common place that we're in, that only can serve community. And so I would really encourage you, and again, this is a follow-up conversation. Sorry for throwing this at you, that we should have, but we genuinely would love to have you in our classrooms. And we would genuinely love to look you eye in eye and talk to you about what's going on in those rooms and try to make the school district as good as it possibly can be. So I hope you consider that. It's a good idea. Otherwise, I wouldn't say it. But I also very much appreciate the time. So thank you.
Thank you, John. Is there any further public comment from the folks here in the town hall? Okay. Is there any public comments from the people joining us on the internet?
See any? Somebody did join, but I don't see a hand up or anything.
Okay. All right. Seeing none, we will move on with the agenda. All right. Thank you. Next up, we have our business affairs, and we will start with the approval of meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from September 8th. If we could just include who took the minutes. Because it's not on there. It got cut off.
Oh, did I get cut off?
I'll second so that we can
Jump in.
Sorry.
All right. Thank you for that.
I would also just make a slight adjustment to point 7 because I think the budget update was actually given by Becca that night. I didn't speak to that. I don't know that it's not a big deal.
I think you did briefly talk about just like
It wasn't much of a presentation.
it wasn't
And
much.
it wasn't a presentation on that.
No, but I think you talked about our first meeting quickly.
Collectively, we might have.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. And Mr. Wood took these minutes?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll just add that to the bottom. Any other edits?
Mm-mm.
All right. Okay. That sounds fine then. Did you make the motion with edits?
Mm-hmm.
You did.
And I seconded the with edits.
Sorry. In which case, let's take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect. All right, the meeting's passed. As far as correspondence, I do not have any. You don't have any? Okay, perfect. So we'll move to administrative reports, starting with Superintendent Wood.
Yes, just a few things. Take that off screen for a minute. So we had an open house at Hatfield Elementary School last week, which was very well attended, which is great. Great to see so many of you there with children. I have been involved since I came with the Rural Schools Initiative. And this past week, we had a meeting, a little kind of offshoot of that as the Rural Advocacy Organization, similar membership. We had a presentation conversation with MARS, which is the regional school district group. And just trying to, we have a lot of common areas of interest in trying to get more funding and different areas of funding into the funding formula and into the law. There is legislation currently being proposed to move the contribution, the state's contribution, from 41% to 46%. That's Senator Jason Lewis's bill. And so we're certainly supportive of that. It would be over time. I don't know how many years, and that may be a factor of it passing, obviously, but every percent helps everybody. So we're certainly supportive of that and hope that will continue to move forward. We just reporting on the update on COVID. There have been 7 cases in the town of Hatfield based on their information from their website. We have not had any in the schools. There's not been any transmission between students or among staff. And so that's certainly good. Tomorrow will be our first day. We're, as part of the state initiative with CIC, in order to staff that, the governor allowed the Army National Guard to participate. So we'll have 4 members tomorrow at HES helping Nurse Jean. And then we will, the following, depending on when they can get staffing, we may split them up the following week and have 2 over here at SA. And so we hope that will certainly speed along. It's a very lengthy process, certainly at HES, in terms of, I would say, when I was there, she probably took from start to finish about 3 hours. Yeah. And that's a considerable amount of time, probably more than that. So, this will cut that down tremendously. So that'll get her skill set taking care of kids, all kids, for other issues and other business that she has at hand. So we're very excited that that's going to happen. We think we've been told, or I've been told in various settings, actually now two different settings, the Commissioner of Education will make some sort of recommendation regarding masks. There's been a lot of conversation in the superintendent circles and in the nurse circles as well, that this month-to-month business is not very helpful to people. And so he may address that in terms of a longer term, or possibly, getting avenues for more people to meet that 80% benchmark, which he has encouraged. We're a lot closer to that 80% than I thought, actually. So when I got the updated figures, we're about 79% at SA. So we're very close. And when and if they get the vaccine for students 5 and up, we'll certainly see if that allows us to move to that 80% relatively quickly. That would still be a vote by the school committee. Well, back up. So first we have the Board of Health matter. So that would have to be looked at and addressed. And then we would have to have a vote by the school committee as to whether or not they wanted to go, what they wanted to do, what you wanted to do as a group. So there'd still be some decision-making that needs to be done. Just for a matter of information for the school committee, the mask conference is up November 4th, 5th. That makes sense. I think all in person are full, but it is virtual. So if you have an interest in that, please certainly take advantage of that. We had the heads up presentation upstanders last Thursday, and sparsely attended, but very interesting conversation with Bonnie Atkins, the presenter and facilitator of the conversation afterwards. So I know you were part of that, and I think at least for part of it you were there. Maybe I thought I saw your name. Nope. No. So it was a very fascinating movie and very good conversation. The weekend before, we of course had homecoming at Smith Academy, and that was very well attended and very nice to see. So many people enjoying the community, the games, the floats, the very loud sirens. I don't know, the heaviness of the air in the morning, I think, makes them louder. I'll be the judge of that. So that's my report.
All right, wonderful, thank you. Do committee members have any questions for Superintendent Wood?
I do. But go ahead, Christy.
No, I can wait.
I was wondering what the percentages of staff that's vaccinated.
So we don't have an exact number, but we think we're about 85%. So the administration hasn't asked anyone. So there was a survey that was a volunteer only back in the summer, and I think people might be updating Nurse Jean individually, and the information is that it's above 85%. So we would probably need to verify that, because I do have to sign an attestation document to say that everybody's there, but I think we're there.
So when you say the 79%,
That was just kids.
That's just
students.
That's great.
So then we're pretty much where we could be to lift the masks at Smith Academy then?
I think so.
So
We
Where
definitely
do we go?
definitely to have the conversation.
Yeah.
So we just need to get those last few kids vaccinated.
We have to be at 8.
We have to be at 80.
Great.
When is the commissioner due to talk about that?
That I don't know. So last Wednesday at a roundtable meeting, we had a conversation among superintendents, and the wind was that he was going to speak this week. He just published his newsletter. I have not had a chance to look at it, so I don't know if he said something in there. But he does tend to do things like on Mondays. So
I guess I'm just concerned that we're going to be masked forever. That 20% of children is going to be having to wear a mask, even if we lift it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Or do
so
we lift it and
it wouldn't be, so I think the committee's vote would be
to
to
recommend?
make optional.
Yeah.
But I think the idea or the understanding, this is my sense of why they chose 80%, is if the community is at 80%, even others who are unmasked are safer
Okay.
than,
So,
it's one layer of safety that they could have, but the mask would add a double layer.
Okay. Right. And I know I got information, you probably can correct me, but I got some information from the pediatrician, and they're looking like next month that they're going to have the vaccines in their hands.
That's
I
great.
have a very big problem with mandating masks or vaccines for young children, so that concerns me, and I am pretty doubtful that we're going to get to that 80%. So how do we get around that? I mean, there's certainly a lot of kids that are going to get vaccinated,
Right.
but I can't imagine it'll be 80%.
Yeah, certainly not without a more official mandate, but it would be voluntary, as they have been. So, I'm hoping that the 80% that are already vaccinated have siblings and that it's already part of that family to make that decision. So we'll get there faster than that's my hope.
I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Exactly.
So it seems like Smith Academy is pretty much there. Can we have a vote to?
Yeah, so
to
we'll
lift it on
need to see what
November?
the commissioner says. And yeah, we'll need to
When's our next
work
meeting?
together with the Board of Health, and then it can come before the committee. So our next tentative meeting that has not been posted, but we
Right.
were planning on the 10th.
So by current guidance, we could have it lifted essentially on the 1st, which is next Monday.
No, because we're not quite at 80%.
Right.
And again, you would have to vote.
I mean, that's.
Hem and
I
haw
am
over
because
1%?
I have to
Well,
sign my
that's-
name that we are. So
Okay.
Yeah.
You have to sign your name. Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounded,
Live in.
or are you, I'm not trying to step on you. Something
Just
else?
what a world we live in.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
So
Unbelievable.
I hear Nurse Jean spending a considerable amount of time getting the testing done, and I admire her for her persistence on that program, because I know they had a lot smooth, and then CIC came in, and it's been a little harder. What is the timeline? What's it look like for kids? So an individual kid, it takes Nurse Jean 3 hours to see everybody. What's an individual kid's timeline look like for that pooled testing effort?
I mean, I observed it was very short. Certainly
Just
for
like a
the
minute
older
or
kids,
two?
third grade and up, I'd say less than 2 minutes.
It's pretty quick.
Yeah.
Are we seeing any rise in enrollment on that? Because the enrollment was pretty steady from where it had ended
Yeah.
last year.
I think it's pretty steady. I haven't seen a big click upwards.
Do you know percentage wise how much of this the
I
students are getting it? If you
I
had to guess.
don't.
Is it half?
Mm.
I think it was district-wide, it was well over 200, but I don't know if it was, how much that was the elementary school versus. the
Yeah.
Right.
high
And 90% of the staff was, but it just
Right.
kind of varied.
Did you have more questions, Kathy? Okay. Any further questions for Superintendent Wood? Okay. Principal Buckland.
How are we gonna do this? I think after we do that. Okay, all right.
Okay, good evening. We had the PSAT tests on a couple of weeks ago, and we had 36 students in grade 10 and 11 take those in school. We, as Superintendent Wood talked about, we had a really nice Spirit Week and Homecoming Week a couple of weeks back. And the Student Council is in place now and are actively canvassing input from the student body on issues to bring to the Student Council on Thursdays. Language related to equity and inclusiveness is something that crew leadership will be working with the Student Council on in the next few weeks. And we're also aware that equity and inclusivity in relation to graduation gowns is something that the student body would like to discuss urgently. So that's something we'll be having conversations with and about in the next few weeks. The sports teams are performing well, some a little bit better today than up until today. The boys soccer team won today, and unfortunately the girls soccer team lost in their Western Mass quarterfinals, and the field hockey team have their playoff game tomorrow at Frontier. And the state released MCAS and AP testing schedules, so we're putting those together and letting families know about this process at the beginning of January. I don't think we could do that quite soon, but I don't think it's something that we want to kind of really start pressurizing people into hearing and reading and learning about until January. In terms of the staff, the music and band teacher, Mr. Hurst, continues to do an excellent job in rebuilding the program. And it's really nice to hear middle school and high school bands again in the building. And we're closer than you think to the winter concert, so watch this space. And the computer science team continues to work with the Department of Education and build out computer science offerings at every grade level at the moment. In terms of community, the Smith Academy School Council met last week, and we've started to look at getting stakeholder input
into potentially changing the start and end times of the day at Smith Academy. Alum Carly Giemond, parent Diane Zeinel, and athletic director Alan Slish put together a fantastic combined alum field hockey game and field dedication 2 weeks ago, where many of the stars of the past joined our current team and our current Smith Academy coach, and we hope that the Alum Game can stay as part of the tradition, and the team will be exploring how soccer might be the next Alum Game next year, so watch this space. The Careers Fair on November 4th, we haven't been able to secure many businesses for the 10:30 to 12 time slot live, so we're going to be working with the Junior Achievement in West Springfield to create a virtual Careers Fair on November the 4th during Crew. The Spring Musical, I'm delighted to say we've got 2 co-producers, a director and a musical director, and that team will be meeting with the students who signed up to perform and help backstage next week, and a timeline and dates and performance name and things like that will be coming out in the next couple of weeks, so that's great to look forward to. Grade 8 information. There was a grade 8 information evening last week in relation to the field trip to Nature's Classroom in May, and this week is kind of a yes, I'm going, or no, I don't want to go survey that parents and families will be asked to complete. And we're delighted to be able to kind of offer that to grade 8. I think they missed out on the trip in 6 and 7, and it's a nice way to step back into normalcy. And next week is the last week in the quarter for quarter 1, and I'll be sharing feedback surveys with students, family, and staff. Just a kind of a how are we doing? How's everything going now? We've been back for almost 10 weeks, and it will inform how we continue to implement our goals for this year. And I'll be sharing that publicly in one of my weekly newsletters. And just jumping quickly to the social justice and equity piece, a social justice and equity group has been started in the student body, and we've created a website page and a rolling news section on our Smith Academy site. And this is a kind of an advisory exploratory body that's going to be run by students and help other students look at inclusive language and work with staff and crew on some of the crew content, as well as some of the academic language and inclusive behaviors as we kind of work together as a partnership throughout the school. They're also going to be attending the school council, and I'm hoping that somebody from that group will be able to attend the next school committee meeting next month to talk through that initiative. And that's everything.
Thank you. Do committee members have any questions for Principal Buckland?
Just to understand, the social justice and equity group, is that staff and students, student-led, like what's?
It's a student initiative that
Okay.
we're supporting and looking at how they can help advise in all facets. Yeah,
And so when they come to speak to us, they'll give us some background on
exactly.
how they're ramping up their own journeys.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Great.
Do you have that website offhand?
It's on our website.
It's on here.
Yeah, it'll be a page on our website.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's good.
I just want to make a comment that I was at the Alum Game for a while and really enjoyed the community spirit there for Judy Strong. And Steph, you did a great job in your position again. So, gear up for next time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
it was a really
nice
nice day.
event.
It was really fun to have like the whole community come together with something so positive. So thanks. All right. If there are no further questions for Principal Buckland,
Oh, I do have, MCAS, you talked about MCAS coming up, but you've gotten the results back. Are you guys going to talk about those or
Yep,
after?
we're
Is that
gonna
your
present
presentation?
presentation.
wonderful. All right. Principal Driscoll?
All right. So as Mr. Wood said, last week we had our open house. It was wonderful. It was really well attended. It was so nice to see people in the building together. So nice to see the kids showing off their work that they've been doing throughout the year and everything they've been working on. It was a lot of fun to host a community event again in the school. So looking forward to doing more of that this year, and as we get further into the year. A huge thank you to the PTA as well as to Lashko Tree Service. If you have been to our playgrounds recently, you have seen the new wood chips out there. They delivered those all. They donated all of those wood chips. And another huge thank you to the volunteers that came and showed up to help spread them with bobcats and shovels and rakes and everything else. The playgrounds are cushy, they look good, and they smell really, really nice. So just a huge thank you to everyone who was part of that effort. It was great. Our after school program now is in full swing. Reports are that people really like it, that it's a nice program, and that the kids are really enjoying themselves in the enrichment programs, as well as the academic support that's offered. We are in the process now of gauging interest in a before school program. I think there's plenty of interest for a before school program. And they have posted advertisements for people to staff that. And the pre-registration form for the before school program will be coming out this Friday as part of the weekly update. So that's exciting. As Mr. Wood said, we've started with our pooled testing, and it's been running smoothly here at Hatfield Elementary. We're excited to have other folks coming in to support as well. I know Nurse Jean will be really happy to have some folks supporting too. It's just good to have another layer of protection as we head into the cold season. So things other than COVID that can get people. The PTA is hosting Spooktacular this Friday, so another great community event. It's on 10/29, so this Friday from 5 to 7. It should be a great event. Folks can get tickets online to it. And they'll also be doing trunk or treat as part of that too, which would be really, really great. There's a lot of folks have been donating candy for trunk or treat as well as for the linseed path. Is that no? Primrose. Sorry, Primrose Path, which is a popular trick or treating destination. As folks have mentioned, MCAS results they were disseminated to families last week. Might have been the week before because this was previous update. Apologies. So those were disseminated, and we'll be kind of pouring through those in more detail in a little bit as we go through our presentation. And I think that's it from the elementary level.
Great. Any questions for Principal Driscoll?
I have one.
Mhm.
I think you had a meeting with the Boy Scout that was interested in doing
Yes.
an Eagle project.
Mhm.
Is that moving forward?
It is. We're really excited about it. It's going to be a Gaga Ball pit. Looking to hear.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's for those of you who don't know what Gaga Ball is. It's
So
a
good.
combination of like dodgeball and wall ball with the ambiance of a cage match. It's just wonderful.
Stop it.
It's
I'm so
great.
excited.
And the kids love it. It's a great game. So we're looking to work with Phil from the Highway Department on kind of location, just make sure we're all squared away to poke holes in the ground and get the construction going on that. So that'll be great.
And that's one of our own Boy Scouts who's working on an Eagle project to do this.
Wonderful.
Yes, high
I love
fives
it.
to
A
him.
win-win.
That's
Right.
amazing.
So I have a question, and this is not, I don't want this to come across as anything less than enthusiastic for all the updates on the playground, but I've had someone raise some concern to me about the size of the wood chips. Are we seeing any actual incidents because of some rather large chips?
We are not. We haven't seen any wood chip related incidents. We have employed some of the kids to collect the bigger ones, and
Right.
they make great kindling. So if
Yes.
anyone
There you go.
is interested, so
That's awesome.
slowly and surely we're seeing the size of the wood chips go down as we're collecting those.
That's a great solution. Thank you.
I know what you mean because you can't look a gift horse in the mouth.
And it was like, but people are like, have you seen these wood chips?
Yeah,
And they had some
normally they're-
concern. And so, yeah,
Normally they're double ground for playground use and
Yeah.
these more.
And
So
that's a great solution.
I think it's perfect.
Uh,
Love it. Sounds great. I understand you have a presentation. Yes.
Can we?
Yeah.
Are we
go
going to
ahead.
hear from
Director.
Director of Student Services?
Yeah, I was going to say, is it okay if we go ahead to Director Bremner before we do that, or?
She's part of that presentation.
Oh, excellent. Sorry about that.
All right. So for special education, we've been busy in providing a lot of training and opportunity for our staff. At Smith, I provided them really targeted guidance on educational performance summaries from the general education teachers. This information was also shared with HES, but was not assigned specifically. And conversely, at HES, we focused on resources around graphic organizer use in math and reference sheets with scaffolded notes. Again, this was shared with Smith, but not directly assigned to them. We only have so much time, so it's things that at their leisure they can check out. No laughing over there, but the HES paraprofessionals have been provided with links to online modules around autism and early childhood modules. Both the school counselors are getting the chance to go hear Ross Green speak in December. He's the author of Explosive Child, and he created collaborative problem solving, and that was use of one of our grants. Myself and one counselor are attending Title IX training tomorrow, as Chris reminded me, because I thought it was in November. And we have rehired a new long-term substitute at the elementary school for the younger grade special education position. And we are continuing to try to hire the 2 vacant para positions at Smith and a replacement para position starting on Monday at HES. We have purchased updated social, emotional, and behavioral testing in order to complete the testing ourselves at HES instead of contracting that portion out. And we have expanded the testing resources at Smith in that area. That was grant funded. I will be providing guidance to all the HPS staff on progress report content as we approach the first grading period ending at Smith. And we are looking to restart the NEBO partnership to do the pre-employment units through Mass Rehab in one of the sections of our skills class in Q2 at Smith Academy. For our child find efforts, I continue to partner with Criterion and Reach Early Intervention and tightening up procedures, particularly around if they can tell us if there's any referrals coming down. And we have completed about half the universal pre-K screenings so far. We should be done by the end of this week, early next week. Connor and I are working on coding and review of data results and resources for staff around intervention and alignment with the accelerated roadmap. And I'm attending BST in both buildings, providing support and recommendations around tiered intervention and just the special ed referral process. Our ELL coordinator is preparing to support for the access testing, which is MCAS for ELL students. And she is attending an EL leadership network training event this Thursday at through DESE. That's what I've got.
Thank you so much, Director Bremner. It's a lot of training. What questions do folks have for our Director of Student Services?
I was wondering if you're going to be doing anything to meet the families and students of special education, because I noticed that you guys weren't there during our open house the other night.
I unfortunately had a previous meeting for my grad school on Thursday night, so I wasn't able to attend. I have talked with Sean Selby, the president of the CPAC, and we have not scheduled the first CPAC meeting, but we are looking at availability in November and December to get that going. Again, please join the CPAC Facebook page. We are looking for membership. Membership is quite low. So that is a venue to be engaged in that way.
I was just curious, the families that are actually in special education. I wanted to meet you guys. And then I forgot to ask you, Connor, when is 6th grade doing theirs?
They had theirs the night before.
Oh, okay.
they
So
had theirs
theirs
on
was the night
Wednesday.
before. Okay.
Yeah. Which was also well attended, from what I hear.
Of course.
All right. Okay. If there are no other questions from committee members, our student representative did contact me to say she was going to be unavailable tonight. So we have a presentation.
Yes, so we're going to wrap up their reports with the overview of our MCAS performance for last year.
Wonderful.
So I guess, do I need to plug in? How do you guys want to do that? I've got it uploaded here. If
Plug
you,
into that, we should all be able to see it. on
right.
here.
It's on your computer, not the place.
We have a problem over here that we, oh, there it goes.
There we
It
go.
was that.
You're
Don't ask me
back?
about technology.
We haven't been on.
We're
Well,
on.
right, I had
We're-
unplugged
We're
for
now
a bit.
on.
No,
Yeah.
through the whole meeting. It was never on.
Oh,
Oh, it is now though.
We're good.
Now.
Rock and
We
roll.
fixed it.
Wonderful.
okay,
Somehow,
so
Self-sufficient down here on our end.
I want
Presenter review.
I think everyone's going
Gonna time you.
all right. So you're first.
I think.
You're first.
All right.
All right, so this is an overview of the assessment results that were conducted last year through MCAS, as well as some of the internal data that we collect. So as an overview, Hatfield Public Schools, grades 3 to 8, you can see on these next few slides how our averages compare to those of the state. So you see on the left side, district, and on the right side, state. So the way it's color-coded, blue is exceeding expectations, percentages of students. Green is meeting expectations. Orange is partially meeting expectations. And red is not meeting expectations.
Yes. Okay.
Duplicate. Is it showing up on your screens?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think everyone can see it.
Is it showing up on your screen?
Yeah,
just-
But it's not showing up in public.
We can turn one
I don't
around.
know why it's not. Can you do presenter mode in your meeting, your stream?
Oh, I think I can, yes. You're really testing my technological abilities here.
It's kind of like a radio without a
You have to click on the little screen.
Yeah, you gotta.
Not that one.
My screen's off, does it?
No.
I feel like Connor's on between two words.
There you go.
All right.
There we go.
Can,
Thank you.
Can you all see it on your monitors too?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is 3 through 8, everyone. So it includes the elementary school as well as Smith Academy. We'll go through each kind of grade band individually too. So next slide. So you can see third grade ELA compared to math, again, district and state. So you can see the places where we exceed the state average and those where we fell short of the state average. Interestingly, as we go up in grades, you can see kind of how that shifts over time too. Next slide, please. So fourth grade, you can see.
Can you just go back to that
sure.
real quick?
Yep. So you can see here for ELA in third grade, we had slightly more students exceeding expectations in the state, fewer students meeting them, and more students partially meeting them. Kind of pretty much the same, not meeting them.
It looks like
For math, it was lower. We had fewer students exceeding and meeting, more students partially meeting, and more students not meeting in third grade. For fourth grade, you can see the comparison side by side here. For the district, we had slightly more students exceeding and slightly more students meeting expectations, slightly more students partially meeting, and then fewer students not meeting in ELA. For math, we had fewer students exceeding, about the same number of students partially meeting and meeting expectations. Fifth grade also takes science, technology, and engineering. You can see for ELA and math at the top there, We had slightly more students in meeting or partially meeting than the state, fewer students exceeding and fewer students not meeting. For mathematics, we had, again, fewer students exceeding, more students meeting, about the same number of students partially meeting, and fewer students not meeting expectations. And then for science, technology, and engineering, we had about the same number of students who were exceeding expectations, more students who met expectations, and then fewer students who partially met or did not meet expectations. And then in sixth grade, we have about the same number of students in ELA who exceeded expectations, significantly more who met expectations, and quite a bit fewer who partially met or did not meet expectations in ELA. For math, slightly fewer who exceeded expectations, more students who met or partially met expectations, and fewer students who did not meet expectations in the sixth grade. So the way you want to kind of look at these trends for MCAS is kind of what I would consider the long game. We're looking for, as students go through their grades, their time at Hatfield Elementary, more students as a percentage going into the blue and the green categories, and fewer going into the orange and the red, and movement between those categories in the right direction. And we can kind of look at how that looks in the next couple of slides too.
So if we're looking at math in sixth grade, there's 50% that are partially meeting expectations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty big number. Seems like math
Yes.
is our troubled spot.
Yep, and we've known that.
that's-
Yep,
Yeah.
we've known that for.
And we don't have our interventionist. Did we hire somebody to take that over?
Working on it.
Yes, we are in the process of right now.
And there's new math curriculum this year.
It's the updated version of the one we've used in the past. It's a different, I would say, more rigorous curriculum, but it's familiar. It's more, rather than getting an entirely new curriculum, we kind of upgraded what we had before. Next slide, please. So looking historically, because again, last year, it's kind of hard to compare last year to years past in terms of what what everyone's experience was across the state, country, and the world. So if we look at this slide, on the bottom you see this is across all grade levels, the average difference between the scores that we had in Hatfield Elementary versus the state. So on average, in 2019, in ELA, we were 15 points higher across all grade levels for the number of students, percentage of students who met or exceeded expectations compared to the Massachusetts. In 2021, above, we were on average 3.75 percentage points above the state when we compared. For math, on average in 2019, we were 5.25 points above the state average. In 2021, we were 4.75 points below the state average. For science, technology, and engineering in 2019, we were 17 points above the state average, and then 14 points above the state average in 2021. And again, that's the combined percentage of students on average in every grade level that takes MCAS that meets or exceeds expectations. Next slide. And this slide takes a little bit of an explanation. When we're looking at this slide, we're looking at percentage change. So comparing similar students to themselves in third grade to fifth grade. So looking at, for example, if we look at the top left-hand corner there, in third through fifth grade in ELA, on average, the number of students who scored either exceeded expectations in fifth grade compared to third grade was 2 percentage points below. That's what the -2 is there for. In Massachusetts, right next to it, is -4. So on average, those students across, we're looking at our own students, their growth, and then we're looking at Massachusetts, those same students compared 2 years apart, because that's when they took MCAS, how it compares. And this is a comparison, again, between Hatfield Elementary School and the state to look at where our comparisons are. So, to look at the colors here, if you see blue, that means we are, more than 10% in the positive as compared to the state. So the first two, or rather 4 categories, HES exceeds, Mass exceeds, HES meets, and Mass meets. We're looking to have, we're looking to see our numbers higher, and then on the other side, we're looking to see those lower because we want to see our partially meets and our meets going down. Green would indicate, slightly less of a positive comparison, but still a positive comparison for Hatfield. Yellow would indicate a slightly negative comparison, and red would indicate a more strong negative comparison. And so again, this looks at growth of the same students over 2 years. And I think what we saw most places, what we clearly saw most places around the state was kind of a shrinking of growth, compared to what would be expected. And what this shows us for our school is we saw less shrinking over time. So if we're looking, strictly looking at, these categories for comparison, we have 11 of the 16 categories would be either blue or green, which is, either strong, strong, less growth, I guess. So strong, less shrinkage of growth than compared to the state. So that's positive. The other positive I would say is if you look over the course of time, just by those results we have this year, and this also is true historically, we see quite a bit of movement from students who over their course of time in the elementary school move from either partially meeting or not meeting expectations up in categories to either meeting or exceeding, which is good. Next slide, please.
Are we, at what point do we ask questions? That's what's going to be helpful for you if we have them when we're on that slide, or do you want to get through everything and then go back?
Let's kind of get, I think we could get through the school by school at least first, and then,
Okay.
and then go back. So comparatively, if we look at what we use as internal data, because again, when you think about MCAS, really specifically last year's MCAS, you're thinking of one snapshot on one day of the year, which can give you a good indication kind of generally of some focus areas, but doesn't give you great either student by student data or even data towards where we need to work. Dibbles is the dynamic indicator of basic early literacy skills. This is the fall data from this year. What's interesting here, and again, this is kind of similar to what we saw in MCAS. If you look from kindergarten up through 6th grade, and we look at our reading scores that are either at or above, below, or well below, we can see how those numbers change over time. So, for example, in kindergarten, we have 32% of students who were given this benchmark assessment and were either at or above grade level, compared to 6th grade, where we have almost 70% of students. And that's a positive trend, and that's exactly what we should see. Over, again, if we're looking at school, we're not looking necessarily at one day or even 1 year. We're looking at trends over time, and this shows us that as our students go up in grades, their reading proficiency improves. Next slide, please. So a couple of things to think about in terms of the results at the elementary level for expected and unexpected understandings. I think everyone expected that we were going to see some learning gaps statewide, and we did. We knew that would be the case based on kind of the consistency that we had last year, and based on a lot of kind of changes throughout the year. What was unexpected and positive that the MCAS data showed, as well as as well as our internal assessments, was that generally trends are positive, and even after a pandemic year, we see that there's a generalized increase in grade level proficiency over students' years in their time at HES, and that was corroborated by some of the fall data that we see. So what should parents and guardians and take away from this? And I think, when thinking, the state puts a whole lot of emphasis on MCAS, but it's important to remember that this is a one-off assessment given after more than a year of being in a global pandemic, in which we shifted learning models 9 times. So that's the context where this data was collected, and that's important context to keep in mind. Virtually all schools are in the same boat as us right now. And we have what I would say is more comprehensive ways to analyze student learning gaps than MCAS. You saw one of those, which was Dibbles. We also use the DRA. We're collecting assessment data through a new math assessment coming up called the Success Maker, which will give us not just kind of student-specific data, but also targeted intervention to go along with that data that relates right to our curriculum. Our growth gaps are very close to those seen statewide. And again, going back to the trends over time, they indicate that gaps are identified and filled by HES staff. And that's, it's something that doesn't just happen. It's a pretty impressive multi-year feat that I think positions us pretty well to target instruction for our kids and move them forward. And I think the most important thing to take away from the assessment and the test scores, the MCAS scores, is that staff are committed to providing students with an excellent educational experience, the vast majority of which you can't be seen on MCAS scores. And I think that's important to remember too. Next slide. And then lastly, I think this is the last slide for the elementary school. How do they inform what we're doing this year? So, primarily, and I think this is the case across the board, we need to continue with in-person learning. The gaps that we see are comparable. They're comparable across the state, across the country, when comparing to proficiency rates from pre-pandemic years. It also demonstrates that there's a learning gap that needs to be addressed at all levels. We break it into tiers. Tier 1 is generalized. Tier 2 is more targeted intervention. Tier 3 is typically special education. But we need to include Tier 1 differentiation. We need to help students access grade level expectations. And this has been seen not just through MCAS, but also through the other data we have, Dibbles, DRA, math readiness assessments. I mentioned Success Maker. It's an assessment in an intervention program that I sort of looped together. And they provide teachers with really valuable feedback on specifically what areas individual students and groups of students need instruction in, and also provide ties to the curriculum for that individualized and specific instruction. It also, we didn't get into the item by item analysis, but one place that really kind of continues to shine for our school is on the writing portion of the MCAS, which is, it's the first place I've ever been where some of the writing responses scored higher than some of the other assessments, and that's a testament to the work that our teachers do, the training that they have in some of the focus areas of things like the SRSD that we have. I think that's it. If you go to the next slide, I think it's the next school. Yeah, okay.
Shall we take a break for questions
Please.
from committee members? Who wants to start?
It's a lot to digest and ask questions for. So there's a part of me that would love to see this maybe in the future as a 2-part conversation where we get some data, and then have a chance to digest and have conversations that we might have some additional, more thoughtful questions to come back to. So I guess one of my bigger questions is looking at the size of our classes in terms of a data collection. Is a extremely small sample size to compare to the state. And so there was one slide where we're looking at, sort of 3rd to 5th, where we're looking at that particular class's evolution. So they're compared against themselves and against the state. Is that the only spot where we're able to kind of find ways to adjust the information to reflect it's a really small sample size? So I find myself looking at this wanting to see like historicals, because it's like, well, is that class just, I mean, if you have 18 kids in your entire grade level, a couple kids in any one spot are going to tweak the curve a lot. So how do you help us account for that when we're looking at this?
And that's what that slide attempted to do. Part of the
Okay.
challenge is at the elementary school, students don't start taking it until 3rd grade. So you had 3rd grade and 4th grade who took it in 2019, who were still in this school last year. So then we had 5th grade and 6th grade. So it doesn't account for the students who moved up to Smith Academy. It doesn't account for the students who, last year was 3rd and 4th year was the first time that they ever took MCAS. So we don't have any growth scores for them. And you're right, when you add to that the fact that if you have a class of 12, if you have 2 kids that aren't feeling well one day and they come in and they take MCAS, on the one day that they were able to, that we had MCAS last year, because it was only one day, then you're right. That's, you're looking at an 18%, drop right there. So that's the kind of thing that is a reason why I would encourage anyone to take a look at these results and say, yeah, when you look at them, you take a generalized look and look over time, over years, to say, okay, yeah, we see that this grade can be improving, but we also see over time the trends in the school. This is what it shows. In terms of more specific student growth data, we could probably get that when we look at older grades as well. But again, for almost half of our school that took MCAS last year, was the first time they've ever seen it. So we have 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, and 2 of those grades were their first year.
But that's going to be true of every other kid that grade in the state. So when we're looking at state comparisons, that's true, and you would expect them to get better. But when you look at the side by side with the state, you would think that would account for some of that, correct?
Yes.
I guess is there a chance to flip back a little bit so we can see things?
And to your point, we can.
Oh.
Is this the one?
Actually, can you go forward about 2? This to me was the most helpful peek, although a little convoluted.
Yep.
I appreciate you spending the time to do that. So the 4th through 6th English language, the -8. Can you speak to that just a little bit in terms of?
Yeah. So what that means is in, and again, this is only in
This is the shift from where they were in 4th to where they went in 6th?
Yep, and it's only in the meets category. And what this chart doesn't account for, it doesn't account for which students moved from
They
lower.
could have moved up.
They could have moved
Okay.
up. So if you see, for example, in the exceeds category here, you have we had an increase on average of 3 percentage points of students, which in a small class
That's a
can
lot
be,
of kids.
that can be a couple of students. In a big class, it can be a lot. And we actually saw an increase in the percentage of students who exceeded expectations. So that means from 2019 to 2021, we saw a noticeable increase of students who exceeded expectations. It's possible that students who met expectations moved into that category. And so you would see that drop in this category. But one of the starkest comparisons for me was when you look and you compare 4th and 6th grade ELA, that first category there, the exceeds. So we saw a jump we saw an improvement in that, from those students compared to themselves of 3 percentage points on average, compared to a decline of 18 percentage points statewide. So, in what none of the data also accounts for is, sometimes on the assessment, some of the questions are more difficult than others. To me, seeing a drop of 18% statewide would say, okay, maybe also this test was difficult, but it shows that our students performed pretty well on that particular one.
One aspect to your point about the data itself, so some of the graphs that you see that we have access to through Edwin Analytics is through the portal. And what I found, my slides are at the very tail end, just to kind of pull, because it's across everybody, but is that there's certain analysis that they won't run if there's not enough in the sample. So, for instance, I wanted to see, our ELL scores.
It's too
They
small.
won't let us,
Yeah.
right? So even in that, so if it's not, I think it's some things it's if you don't have more than 5 kids, some more than 10. So when we try to break it down, it is a barrier to rural schools in that what the state provides us for data at times that they don't provide it in a clean way because it goes down to small amounts of children.
But is that going to account for not having anyone in a whole grade that falls into exceeding expectations? Because we had
Your
grades
group size won't matter there.
Yeah,
I've had
that-
larger pools that have had that.
that to me was one of those moments where I was like, okay, I would like to understand what's going on there. I know you're addressing the math. The math I think we had all talked about for a while. And congratulations on the English language arts scores. And I'm curious to know, I'm glad to hear you speak to the training that particularly HES has had in writing, because everything I've heard about that training was fantastic. And I guess one of my curiosities is how do we have new people coming in. You have more new people coming in this year than some years. How are you keeping that going so that we see this kind of positive result next year, the year after? And so are we able to keep up that training?
Yes, that's in our plan this year, in our PD plan, to keep up both with kind of what's called onboarding new folks, getting them kind of crash course isn't the right term, but getting kind of a more intensive, this is how we do it training, and then also an ongoing training for folks who have been trained but would be good. It's always good to have a refresher.
And every grade sticks to that plan, correct? Everybody teaches on that plan.
Other
Thanks
questions?
for allowing me to ask questions.
No, of course. Other committee members have any questions for Connie?
I think math just really concerns me, and I'm just wondering, did we talk to the teachers of last year to see where that grade was, or did we just start where we normally start?
Both. So teachers every year they do meet with each other to talk about kind of where things are, where things left off. The curriculum, third grade curriculum starts with the beginning of third grade. But there are assessments within the curriculum that can show where students are. So if there are, say you have a third grade class that takes that assessment, it'll show kind of where, what, not specifically what, if they're in a, second grade or first grade, but where within all those grade bands, within the skills, where the skills are lacking. So it will allow teachers to target those areas rather than, okay, this assessment says my students are, a half a grade below, and I'm going to start half a grade below. So, hey, they need work in fractions. So we're going to hit fractions hard this year because that's where it shows that we need that support. So it does allow folks to pinpoint quite a bit more. And one of the benefits of having a small school like we do is we can talk to each other. So it's not like we one grade level can't talk to the teacher in the grade before and say, hey, listen, I'm noticing this. Can you tell me what you worked on and kind of what you did last year? So those conversations help as well.
Well, thank you so much for presenting this for us and explaining some of it. I know that for me in particular, I really appreciated sort of what you illuminated about the internal assessments that we're doing, like you were just explaining, to sort of target those specific areas where we can improve. So yeah, thank you. All right, shall we move on?
All right. So this is results analysis is always kind of, if you go back one slide, like conducting an autopsy. And you can kind of see what killed off a grade or what didn't. I think we all know that COVID had a pretty effective impact last year. And I just wanted to put this up here to kind of let folks know that, yeah, we had testing, the umbrella of testing, but we had a mixture of AP being done at home, MCAS next generation in person. Typically 7 and 8 would have 2 days of testing. As Connor talked about, they only had 1 day. The grade 9 would typically have next generation testing for their science MCAS, which is their high school graduation. Last year they had legacy. So we have teachers teaching next generation for 2 years, ready to adjust to this brand new test, and then been asked to teach the old test with the old standards. And then grade 11 were given waivers for their English and math grade 10 MCAS, except if they wanted to take them for Abigail Adams. So they came in and instead of sitting next gen, they sat legacy, which they hadn't ever been taught. So that's what we're referring to when we're talking about testing. And you can see that when I'm talking about what killed us off, it's an autopsy on a body that will never ever again be in existence, because we know what kind of AP exams are coming up. We know what kind of MCAS exams are coming up, and we can plan and do that. Last year, a lot of this was thrust upon us, and we did as well we could. So that's the context. And if I could have the next slide. And this is the general trend of, the findings from Connor was that if kids are in school, they do better. That's pretty much spelled out in the 2020 to 21 analysis. We had some great AP results in 2020. We stopped school on March 13th and they tested in May. So they had 6 weeks, 5 weeks out. 2021, it's the reverse. They were out from the entire year and they came back in at the end of April and they had their exams. So we had a kind of a pretty clear example that if kids are in school, they're going to do better.
The left grid, is that nationwide, our school, statewide?
That's our
It's
school.
just us.
That's
Okay.
our school, yeah. So you can see that's a generalization. And if you look more specifically on 2020 and 21, you can see that we doubled the number of AP students. Unfortunately, we've halved the number who have achieved over 3. And I think, to your point, Christy, this is a kind of an anomalous grade in that it was a huge amount of kids taking AP. And we're in that funny situation that we want to encourage as many people as possible to take AP, but perhaps not all of those students should be taking AP. But that's an attraction of being in this small school, that we can offer that to as many people as possible. And so moving forwards, if you go into the next slide, please, we can see that there's a lot of similarity between the elementary school grades and the 7, 8, and 10 grades that we're going to go and see through here. This is grade 7, who hadn't taken an MCAS in 2020, and some of them hadn't been in school until the day of the test. So there's a huge reflection on the impact of teaching the power standards as described by Commissioner Riley at the beginning of the year, in which we were asked to focus our teaching on for the testing. And so you can see we're not particularly outstanding, but we're not a million miles away from where we should be. Unfortunately, there's no comparison here because these are folks that haven't sat an MCAS in 18 months, so we can't make a trend there. If you go to the next slide. Again, this is a grade 8, in the same way as grade 5, they sit English, math, and science technology. And we could see that as a district, we're performing well against the state in all the areas. And we haven't got a lot of exceeding expectations, but we're definitely meeting expectations. And I think we're stepping away from the rigor of remote learning that perhaps underlines the point that we're doing enough to keep people in contact. We're not doing particularly well with our remote learning model of stretching those learners at the top, but we're certainly trying to do our best and succeeding keeping everybody in contact with the power standards and reducing the gaps in learning. If I go to the next slide, please. And in grade 10, this is the MCAS the English language arts and math are high school graduation requirements for all students at Smith Academy and in the state of Massachusetts. And we can see here in English, we were everybody passed and got through. And in math, we had a couple of students who unfortunately will have to be resitting either in November or in the spring, as is typical with every other student who doesn't pass in the first time of asking. And the next slide, please, Michael. And here we have the legacy. Remember, we were talking about the different the testing. We have the next generation, we have the legacy, and these are the grades for grade 9 and grade 11. There's absolutely no point in making a comparison with this or any other grade level because this isn't a test they're ever going to do again. This is simply for a graduation requirement for grade 9 and grade 11. They sat it for the Abigail Adams Eligibility Scholarship. And they will never again go near the legacy unless there's another pandemic. But I'm hoping that they won't have to go there anyway. And if you go to the next slide.
Chris, go back.
Yep.
What is the FNIPA? Just tell us what those are.
Fail, needs improvement, was it proficient, advanced?
Okay.
Yeah. So those are descriptors that aren't in use anymore, except for last year when they all set their tests. And so, you know, unfortunately, in the portal that Molly talked about, there's a lot of academic statistics. There's no social emotional testing results in there. We're very fortunate in our region that we had a lot of social emotional analysis throughout the entire year. And I think that you'll be presented with the spiffy results in the next few weeks, I would hope. And I think that the results of which are, or the preliminary results of which are on our website, and we used as a way of informing our goals for this year, really building on making sure that whilst we're back to normal, inverted commas, we're acknowledging it's almost PTSD of suddenly adjusting from one set of circumstances to coming back into school and suddenly having everything normal and nobody's allowed to talk about anything else anymore. So it's the idea of trying to be supportive and structured as well as getting back into the normality of standards and skills. So yes, the MCAS data was used to inform our academic focus, but it wasn't the only thing that we used to inform our focus for this year. And I think we're a little bit ahead of the curve as a district in focusing on community and SEL during the pandemic, because that's given us a great platform at both sides to really look at maintaining the good relationships that we have between staff and students and families, and allowing us to almost, you know, jump back a little bit quicker into focusing on standards and skills in the classroom. Technology support is already a long way in advance of lots of districts, and I think the teachers did a spectacular job last year of going from 0 to hero very quickly in the space of no time whatsoever. And the work of the school council will be using some of this MCAS data in focusing on the school improvement planning for this year, which also looks at social emotional learning, culture and community building. And we took this MCAS data along with the other data points to really focus on our goals throughout the year, which are to build relationships and strengthen community, continue to provide social emotional learning opportunities, and to continue project-based learning. I think one of the biggest things that we lost last year was a reversion back to, I don't want to say chalk and talk, but it was taking away all the gains that we had made with project-based learning, which was focusing on collaborative learning, learning outside of a classroom, working in pairs, working in groups, all of the things that COVID pretty much said that we couldn't do. We were sat in rows in kind of 1950s setup. and the antipathy of project-based learning. So to go back to that will be absolutely fantastic. The guidance team is working on strengthening college and workplace applications. I think the biggest takeaway from this year is, and this isn't a generalization, that quite a few students were very successful with remote learning and have actually accelerated the way that they learn and how they learn and want to be flexible and continue to be flexible with their learning. And that's kind of behoven us to kind of start to think about how we can have internships and work-based learning that is much more flexible. And then the other piece is really looking at the DESI focus goals for us, which is looking at curriculum and planning, learning environment, proficiency, collaboration, reflection, and professional collaboration. So the kind of the traditional areas that the state would like us to focus on. So it's kind of a meshing of the two, as it were. But I think, as Connor talked about earlier on, that the joy of this district, it is so small. Everybody knows everybody else, and we know our students, and we have the capacity to have very close conversations and build individual plans, which I think you pointed out. One inverted commas bad result can really slay the data one way or the other. So I think there has to be a pinch of salt here. Michael, could you go on to the next slide? What are we understanding from these results? Okay, remote learning is tough. If kids are in school, they perform better. The end. I think that's the biggest takeaway. And the more that we can do to encourage students and staff to be in school, the better. I think the NELMS, we're a member of the middle school NELMS organization. They did a survey at the beginning of September about what do children feel in the middle school about coming back into school. What are their hopes? What are their dreams? What are their aspirations? What do they like about remote learning, et cetera, et cetera. And the biggest thing that every single kid said they were looking forward to is seeing their friends. And I think if you're looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you have a community, you have a culture, you have a set of circumstances in which everybody feels safe and happy and they communicate with each other, then you're on a winner. Then you can start to teach the content. And I think that's the biggest piece to focus on. Again, that's kind of, that's simplifying it, but the AP performance really does show that when students are in the building and they have the teachers in front of them and they have the cohesion in the community and the collaboration in the classroom, they do better. And that was completely the opposite throughout the pandemic. That's not to say we haven't analyzed the results, and we talked with the teachers about both MCAS results and the AP results, and looked at adjusting curriculum and looking at going back to project-based approaches to assessment, which they weren't able to do last year. That's some of the things we focused on. And then it's just again, Connor, you made a much more eloquent point about the different learning models here. Some of these kids hadn't stepped foot inside the building until they turned up to do their tests, and then they went home. And it was just a very difficult and challenging set of circumstances in which to get a measure of a kid's academic ability in an hour and a half over the course of that year. And then I can't understress this. There was no state measure of social emotional learning last year. We had to use our own, and I think we've got a really good sense of where our students were and how we needed to support them. Could I have the next slide, please? What's the takeaway from these scores? Okay, keeping our schools open and safe as long as possible. And I think, continuing the Jean Hobie mantra of masks and hand washing and responsibility outside of school, especially when we're coming up to these potential hotspots of Thanksgiving or November break and then the December break. And social emotional support for students continues to be massively important. I think over the summer I attended, it must have been 1 million hours of Southern PD on social emotional learning and supports. And I kind of got the feeling, well, this is a little bit after the horse has bolted, because this is what should have been going on last year. And luckily we've been doing a lot of this last year, but I know, talking to colleagues in other districts, that they're a good 2 semesters behind what we're doing, simply because there isn't the time and the schedule or the structure to allow this to happen. And I think we've got to continue to balance work-life home for students and support families where we can. And then the last piece is really kind of where do we go from here? This is just a reminder for us why we went project-based in the first place. It's looking at, yes, the standards are vital and they need to anchor everything, but getting the students to understand that there are applicable skills that they can master as a result of the standards are the most important pieces. And being able to provide opportunities to demonstrate and try and fail and take risks and utilize those skills go hand in glove with project-based learning. And that's really our focus this year as well with that. And I think that's it. Apart from, oh no, that's you. That's it. Yeah.
All right. So these are the areas that,
Sorry.
you
No.
Can we just
You
allow?
missed your chance.
You tried.
Yeah.
I just wanted to have the opportunity for questions for Principal Buckland. I have one.
Go.
Okay. So I guess this is for both principals, but I was just noticing, Dr. Driscoll spoke very nicely about the gains made in some areas and, the great performance that we see in 6th grade, but that seemed to sort of drop off in 7th grade. And this is an anomalous year, but I didn't know if it's possible or if there have been efforts made to compare the students who, you know what I mean, like who did transition to the new school, from their 5th grade to the 7th grade or 6th grade to 8th.
The quick answer is no.
Is it possible or is
Not
it
yet.
not? It
we
just haven't.
we can do that. I mean,
I
it's a
just was
different
wondering.
test. I mean, it's a different.
Totally
I mean,
different tests.
we could definitely do
They
that. But I
were
mean,
totally different tests.
I know with like but I just wanted to
just
ask.
for
it
just for
makes
example,
it-
if the kids were sitting in English, they would be assigned a testing ticket. Half of the kids will be testing on test A, half of them on test B. So even within a class, they're taking
Right.
different tests. So, and that's the best way of trying to test in one testing session.
Right.
It's an hour and a half as opposed to 2 testing sessions that are 2 hours each.
Yeah.
So yes, we could.
But it wouldn't be very meaningful.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, what we have done is we've been able to break down the standards and we
Right.
can look at where students are meeting or not meeting.
Right.
And we've had those conversations with staff
Mhm.
to kind of ask them to focus their student learning goals or their professional learning goals to target, for example, citing evidence or writing in a particular way or using poetic terms or analysis of poetry. So when they've jumped out, when we've gone through and analyzed the results of those particular classes, that's where we've had those conversations, or when we're looking at math and some of the functions. But generally, it's limited in its usefulness.
And that's the data that's coming out of the MCAS,
Yes.
that breakdown?
Yes.
So are there, the elementary school has these different like internal assessment plans. Are there similar that we're using, or are there any that you can use in upper elementary and middle school?
One of the things that we want to start to think about is extending some progress monitoring for definitely the middle school and then potentially up into grade 9. And it's looking at how we can extend, or whether we can kind of start to look at different ways of doing that within the school, whether it's looking at STAR, whether it's looking at map testing, whether it's extending Lexia up into grade 7. So that's one of the targets for this year, to sort of analyze what's the biggest bang for our buck. Where are we going to focus our attention? I definitely think with math, it will make sense with that development of the curriculum, but also there's tremendous gains being made in English. It would make sense for us with this brand new cohort, as it were, that haven't been through the testing, to start to do that. So that's definitely one of the objectives that we want to kind of come out with a plan for going forward.
Awesome.
When
Thank
you're, can I jump on that?
Yes.
When you're looking at that plan, are you doing any analysis of where, if there are any trends where we lose students? So are there particular grades where we see historical dropout of like, oh, we had X number of kids until we got to this grade and then we lost some percentage? I mean, I know we do when we move from 8 to 9 because there's some other choices, but are there any other sort of, are we looking at that as well? Because some of the testing, I would love to see what our opportunities are to see if we can be keeping more kids, where that makes sense, if there is any trend to loss. Because that would be another thing that would impact some of those numbers.
In terms of enrollment.
Enrollment.
Is that what you're looking at? So
Like 6th to 7th, is there a trend, historical trend?
Or even 5th to 6th. Just looking at
where typically do we lose students? So we're asking, how many do we lose?
is there a trend to where we lose them?
Yeah.
Because if there is, if you're looking at some of the testing that goes on, if there's something to understand there so that we can see if there's anything to learn and why we're losing, that would be a piece of the puzzle as why we're losing, so that we can start to find solutions to that, if there are.
I mean, I would argue looking at moving from 8 to 9 was where we also lose children, and they will go to the vocational colleges or schools, and 6 to 7, I think, we could speak to a similar geographic reason. I mean, I don't think they're leaving for academic reasons. I'm not.
I
really
don't
sure.
know that they're. I guess I'm just surprised as we went through multiple grades that we have several grades, both English and math, where we have no students that are on the front tail of that curve, that there's the bar is nil. And it's like, well, where are those kids? Because it would seem that the population, that there's some, it's not like there are no exceeding expectation kids running around. So I'm just curious
Typically,
what happens there.
95% districts have to have 95% of kids testing. That wasn't the case this year.
Okay.
So 7 and 8, not everybody decided to test.
Okay.
And I mean, I think we looked at the data. There wasn't a huge amount different to normal, but that's one aspect. And I guess if we're looking at the results here, an interesting thing to do would be to kind of extrapolate the results of those kids that subsequently left, so we could then analyze the data of the remaining kids. That might be one way of looking at it, or vice versa. I mean, the difficulty is that, I kind of made the pithy joke, it's an autopsy. It's a bit late when we're looking at this point, which goes back to the progress monitoring idea. So we can kind of have a formative assessment rather than just waiting for the snapshot at the end.
Thank you.
To wrap it up
Yeah.
All right.
quickly.
I'll do my best. So there's a number of special populations that I am tasked with keeping an eye on. And so when we look at the MCAS information, students with disabilities are looped in. So whether they're an IEP student or 504 students just with a disability. And then we have ELL students. The other areas that I look for are any students who are experiencing homelessness or in foster care, and then our child find efforts at the early childhood level. If you could go to the next slide. So as I alluded to earlier, some of this data I can't provide to you tonight. I'm open to providing you other communication if needed, but just due to the incredibly small number of students who are ELL, I'm not able to present their information tonight. We currently do not have any students who are designated as homeless in the Hatfield Public Schools, so that is a matrix I don't need to present. And the matrix do not provide us specific foster child information, though I know who they are, and so we're taking special care to analyze that data in those small numbers. Next slide. Oh, I think I added a slide since the last time you had it, maybe. Yeah, can you go back one? Oh, I guess it didn't pop up. I do have a kindergarten, I don't know why it didn't show up, universal screening slide that I'm looking at. It's right there. And I did just add it, so I just want us to know about it. One thing that we were all really concerned about was kindergarten, because those kids maybe haven't attended a daycare or a preschool potentially. And of our, we use the early screening inventory. This is an assessment I wasn't familiar with. And it really comes up with 3 things: whether we rescreen, they're okay, or there's a higher level of need we should refer. And almost everybody was okay. It was very high. Most everybody was okay. We had a few rescreens and a very small number of referrals. What was interesting to Connor and I as we looked at that data is we have some kindergarten students who are already on ed plans and who, through other testing, clearly have need. it wasn't picked up on this screening. So I'm exploring an updated screening for our kindergartners. I think that ESI is appropriate for our preschoolers, but I want to check out other options so that we can identify kiddos earlier, because that was an interesting comparison that everybody looked okay, but we knew there was need based on other assessments. All right, to this slide, the glories of MCAS. This goes back a very long time. This goes back to 2008. So you're looking at quite a bit. And what this looks at is the growth of students with disabilities. So in consideration of it's them to themselves, whether they made growth. And so we would really like, a high amount of growth. But as you see, we had this last time around, 60% of our students with disabilities had very low growth. But then we did have the rest of them making low, moderate, high, or very high growth. And it's interesting to me, as a new person looking at the trend over time. Way back in 2008, 48% of kids made very low growth. So that was interesting to me, because other than like the real estate market, I can't think of what happened in 2008. So in general, 2011 was also a spike. So in general, Hatfield's really come down in a lot of ways, but this last year, as Chris alluded to, it impacted everybody, and it impacted students with disabilities likely in a higher way. We are seeing, just in general, we have more moderate to severe needs students at the earlier grades than we have had previously. That's why we have the STAR program and other interventions that are in place. We're establishing more robust tier 1, 2, and 3 interventions, and are making improvements based on the dyslexia guidance to help our students with specific learning disabilities in reading. Next slide. So this, sorry, I gotta have my readers on. This again looks at just students with disabilities. So this is students on IEP or 504, grades 3 to 5. And it's in comparison to themselves over time. So we don't have anybody with a learning disability exceeding expectations for the past few years. We do have folks meeting expectations, but it did dip down. And then we have partially meeting expectations. That went down, but unfortunately it's because it shifted over to the not meeting expectations. But again, as we know all the things that we said impact all kids, we know there's evidence it disproportionately impacted students with disabilities. I know that Hatfield provided some acceleration learning this past summer and other compensatory services in specific situations, and we are trying to hit the ground running with our students with disabilities this year. Next slide. This one is complicated, and this is the glories of Edwin Analytics, and I'm not going to take ownership, but I will explain this. So this is looking at Smith. These are 10th grade, or 9th. No, it's 9th and 10th grade. So student growth. This is looking at student growth of students with disabilities versus their general education peers. So this is blue versus yellow. So blue being students with disabilities, yellow being students without disabilities. In general, it's kind of on par. So we're kind of right in that same bandwidth. And one thing that we're doing is we're redefining the skills class to be more targeted around both academic content and vocational preparation while embedding executive functioning skills and organizational strategies. So that's been really helpful work that I think bang for our buck will help our students at Smith, which is 7, 8, 9, 10 in preparing for MCAS and taking the MCAS. So this was, it was a situation of they wouldn't let me, because last year was optional. So the few kids we had with disabilities that took the MCAS, it wouldn't give me the graph. So this was what I could pull at that age band. Any questions?
What's the assessment used for kindergarten, the name of it?
So we use the ESI, the early screening inventory, and it is what we're using for preschool and kindergarten. I'm doing the preschool evaluations right now, and it's been lovely. They are awesome little people who are very chatty. And I feel it is very developmentally appropriate for our 3 and 4-year-olds. I think we need an updated screener for our kindergarten. When you look at the Dibbles scores, what they do in the Dibbles is nothing like what they do in the ESI. And I think we have some other things that we could really target students who need more intervention, not necessarily referral to special ed, but a little more support with a better screener. It's something I want to explore this year.
Have you heard of early bird education?
No.
Maybe jot that down as something to look into. I think that's specifically for reading. Not sure what your other was, but
Yeah, a lot of schools use the dial. Yeah, we have a few options, and I'll be working with the kindergarten and preschool team on what makes the most sense, aligned with the rest of our curriculum. One thing that it really, it kind of speaks to what you were talking about, like seeing growth over time. One thing as we were preparing for this meeting that I found very difficult to do was being able to gather data quickly in outside of the MCAS data. So we do have the DRA and Dibbles and the SRSD writing analysis and some of the math testing at the elementary school. But we were just talking tonight about organizing it in a way that we can run analysis faster so that I can look at that data through the lens of the students with disabilities and growth over time. And then there really is, we really are looking at something more at Smith for progress monitoring so that we can look at larger trends for individual students, because in a district this size, as I said, if we have a little bubble worth of students with disabilities, it could shift the narrative quite a bit in a tiny class. And depending on the general needs. So it's a work that all of us are, we are newish, depending on who you're looking at. And so it's an ongoing conversation we're having in leadership around, what data is good data? How do we use it? Do we have access to it now? And we're exploring new options, but it's something that has been hard to kind of find trends because MCAS data, it is what it is. And it is kind of more helpful to look at individual student data in a district this size. We can do it.
Yeah. I find this whole conversation refreshing after a lot of months of COVID talk. So I thank you all for bringing this back. And I get that the testing for the last year is kind of impossible because it's such an anomalous thing. But I'm heartened to hear the conversation you were collectively having as a leadership team. I think one of the challenges is while MCAS doesn't necessarily reflect what's going on in our district, it is what becomes accessible publicly to folks, and that the onus is on us to get the communication out if we have more interpretation or more analysis that's on data points that's a better reflection of our student body. So
I think the key is that data is to inform our instruction. And if we have more vital data, we'll hopefully see those MCAS numbers go up. So that public facing data should improve if we can be more nimble. Oh, that's a Desi word. Be more nimble in our individualized data analysis.
Right. Well, thank you to everyone for that comprehensive review. Definitely appreciate it.
And I ask that in the future, if there's presentation like this, that we can get a
Yes.
copy ahead of
I,
time.
Yes.
I would also appreciate
Yes,
that.
absolutely.
Principal Buckland had mentioned the Spiffy report coming out soon. If maybe we
Yes.
could get that before our
In
meeting,
advance.
so we
Absolutely.
could
of the
digest it a little
presentation.
bit before the
Yeah,
meeting.
the latest thing we have is on the website, and I don't know when they're going to put it together. Lisa Goldsmith is putting that together, but as soon as we
Okay.
get
Okay.
it, I'll share it.
That would be great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. So next on the agenda, I would like to move into a short executive session. Did you have something?
No,
No.
I'm just yawning, sorry.
It's
Did we want to do the CPA thing out of order so that they could leave if they needed to? 'Cause I'm assuming that
I can.
Principal Buckland would want to talk to that proposal that,
It's getting late.
I feel bad making them stay.
Yeah. I didn't
And
think would be
if he
very
has
long,
to
but
present on that.
that's fine with me, I guess. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
All right.
Whatever you-
Okay.
Just to let him go.
That's fine. All right, we will move to item 7, consideration of a proposal for the recreational path. So committee members have information in the packet from a proposed CPA grant application. And is there anything that you or Chris would like to speak to?
well, Maybe I could ask Chris just to, this kind of came out of some conversation that people were having at the school. Maybe you could start there, Chris, and just
Yeah.
briefly tell us
So
how it originated.
yeah, we had been looking at ways of integrating the grounds and the fields at Smith Academy a little bit more into the community and finding ways of making us a more accessible entity. And I think it came up through conversation with one of the members of staff who, I don't know, there was an idea that came up about proposing a walking path or an exercise path around the grounds at Smith Academy, cutting past certain playing fields and going around others. And then it kind of moved a little bit quicker. And then we had some more substantial conversations about what that might look like and how it might be used and when it might be used. And it's kind of moved rather rapidly since then.
Yes.
And as you can see there.
Yeah.
So
Two
what's
sides of it.
what's being proposed is sort of a 3-phase approach. This CPA grant would be initiating the phase 1 of the walking path, which would essentially go out to where the baseball backboard is and the start of the hockey field, and would turn right and take you down to the I'm calling it a pond, but
Yeah.
let's call it maybe marshland is a better word or descriptor. And
Fishing derby. I mean.
oh, really? You get fish out of there?
There was a fishing derby in
Oh.
the year out of there.
So maybe it is a pond. And then phase 2 would be to take it to the right and come back around all the way to the pathway in the sidewalk on the front of the building. And phase 3 would be to go to the left and go all the way around the outskirt of the Smith Academy property and come back and meet the original backboard area there. And along the way, we would secure funding maybe annually from the CPA for the kind of, I'm calling them implements, but that's not the right phrase, but different settings along the way that would allow you to have athletic events, push-ups, sit-ups, chin-ups, things like that, to make it kind of more useful for our phys ed program, as well as the community. But it would be essentially a walking path for the community when school was not in session.
Okay.
So what's the ask of the committee at this juncture?
That we submit a proposal to the CPA
Yep. So the CPA application
due November 1st.
is due on November 1st.
Okay.
So I was part of the initial discussions about this, but not sort of the compilation of the application. So if committee members have questions,
So
is our time to
we're
discuss.
voting on this to move it to the CPC
to submit the application.
Correct.
for them. Okay.
For phase one.
Okay.
Right.
So I have one primary question,
Mhm.
and that's in moving this forward, if this is a capital cost to the town, are we then saying that this is
Most important.
the front of the list of our capital planning needs? Or it's just on the list of the capital planning needs?
So this would be getting it on the list. The CPC grant that we're asking for would pay for phase one.
Okay.
So can you clarify for us what this $48,000 is exactly covering?
So, and that will probably be revised down because an initial conversation had it to a wider path to begin with,
Mhm.
but we've now narrowed it down to the 4-foot path that it will be for
For the whole thing?
the whole thing.
Okay. So this where it says phase one starts with a 10-foot path, it's going to be 4 feet?
We're going to phase that down to 4 feet.
Okay. And does that include like the different, benches and stuff
It
like
would.
that? Okay.
I think it'll be important to have signage saying no dogs.
There will be a lot of issue about the dogs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially with our athletic fields.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
are already issues with dogs.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
on
don't know how
school
bad it
grounds in
is. I don't
general, let
have a
alone our
sense of it,
athletic
but
fields.
Right.
I would be
I think with good
worried
weather,
about
it's kind of-
that.
it gets worse.
it's worse.
Yeah. And then just to clarify, this, is for the phase one, and then this would be resubmitted for phase two
We
and
would-
three?
Not funnel, but draft a new one for phase two,
Okay.
maybe based on what we learned from phase one and so forth.
How useful is phase one as a standalone entity?
That's my question. It's an out and back.
Right.
You know.
It wouldn't, I mean,
I don't know how
yes,
like
it would be
appealing-
useful because it would get everybody walking in the same direction when we were going to the baseball field, and instead of using the grass. So that in itself would be useful.
Okay.
But you're right, it has a direct,
Well,
but it would
I
also
can-
keep the dogs, if there are dogs, maybe on that path before they started to do business, maybe.
I can tell you as someone that has some mobility issues, that walking out to the field hockey field for the alum
Difficult.
game
Mhm.
was a little tough, a little challenging at times,
Yeah.
unevenness. And by simply having a path
Mhm.
that went out there that was maintained and level and
Mhm.
Right.
not all uneven ground would have been helpful. So for that reason alone, I think it's a good thing.
I guess I just feel like that's all definitely true, but how valuable is it to just do this one section? Is it more valuable to get more of that than it reaches, some of the other locations, and then it's a loop, maybe increase recreational value,
I
but
think
maybe it's not possible to combine them.
We could possibly look at adjoining phase one and phase two,
if the cost was coming down because it went to
get
the
the cost down, we
feet,
could do it that way.
I think, are we limited on the amount the CPA would put towards this? Maybe that's why
I
it's
don't know the
broken up
answer
into
to that.
3
I'm
phases.
sure.
Because sometimes they do that, they only are
Yeah,
allotting so much.
I didn't hear that specifically,
Yeah,
but
I
I was only in an
I don't think
initial
they gave us a
conversation.
ceiling or anything. That
Right.
was an initial cost actually very early on in the conversation with a different width of the initial path and so forth.
I personally don't have anything against doing this. It all seems logical and reasonable. I think it just is a matter of understanding how it impacts prioritization of anything else we need to do.
Right.
So personally, I'm more concerned about the roof.
Yeah, this would not be
So
Right.
I think
I don't
it's two
think
different
this would-
organizations, no?
except
Because
Yes.
it's not
Yes,
coming from
it's not
town
capital.
appropriation.
Except
I mean,
capital.
that it
Different.
But then it says
except
capital's
it
checked off.
says it's checked off. Will the
Right.
project result in capital cost to the town?
because
Yes.
I don't know where phase two. I don't want to
Yeah.
blindside anybody and
Right.
say phase two and phase three we didn't get the CPC grant. If, like to your
Then it
point,
would-
to finish the circuit,
Right.
we we'd want to at least ask the capital plan.
Yeah.
So I just did
So it
did
says
that for,
Has not yet. Oh,
Well, it hasn't been reviewed, but yeah, yes
Sorry.
was highlighted.
Yeah,
That's why.
that was unclear to me.
That's why.
there was a member of the capital plan on that initial phone call, though, phone meeting, whatever.
Hmm.
So I mean, they're aware of it. That
Yeah.
at least that person is. I don't know what the communication was outside.
Well,
that.
doesn't the CPA have to submit capital plans as well, even if they're funded through the grant?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if this
because
is
I mean,
on
it does
their
come out of
list-
town money.
If this is on their list as their priority, that's kind of one thing versus being the top of our priority of capital
Right.
planning list.
Right.
So I think that's,
CPA has dedicated funds. They don't come out of the general.
Right. But it's still funds they have to
They
allot.
have to
Mhm.
present at town meeting and such.
Right. This would, so,
is 4 feet enough for emergency services?
It's not, 10 feet is what
Out
the
of
fire chief
road on it.
would like for that initial piece. And our facilities director would like it paved rather than a solid peat stone. So I'm trying to compromise and get it within what I think CPC will actually
Mhm.
see as being more recreational and
right.
under their purview.
Was this in the I don't go back far enough to understand what went on putting in the new field hockey field. Was
Yeah,
this a
None of us
conversation
do. Well,
when
Kathy might.
I
that?
don't know the answer to that.
I don't think so.
I will tell you the original plans of Smith Academy actually have a path
Path?
Have a walking path.
going in that direction.
Yeah.
And one that actually is there, but it's kind of overgrown, right behind the school and going down to the what would be the baseball field. I think it stops there. I don't think it goes as far as the soccer field. And I don't think that the existing one goes to the baseball field. It kind
It
of
was
stops at the
discussed when
building.
we first started talking about the field hockey field, but
Wasn't in the
just
budget.
kind of like as a wish thing of,
Right,
it would be
yeah.
nice to have a path out there. I mean, we were more concerned about, can we get water out there?
Right.
Yeah, that was a bigger
Yeah.
priority.
So, in order to, so we need to vote on whether or not we want this application to go forward.
Correct.
And then we've already talked about in here some edits that might be made. So this goes forward to,
We'd make those edits and it would go to the CPC by
CP.
November 1st.
okay. And then going from there, are
We have a chance to
represented to us?
we could represent and make sure that you're on board. I don't know what kind of changes or latitude we have. I'm sure we have some, as long as it doesn't exceed if they approve it or exceed the kind of scope of what we're talking about here.
I think if what I'm hearing is that if we want to come back in December
Mhm.
and tweak anything, we probably could
Mhm.
before the
It's
CPA
just getting the
gets too
initial
down.
interest in.
Right.
But I think just to get it into the deadline of
Right.
getting it in their
To go through.
queue.
Yeah, because I like the idea as a
Mhm.
concept, but I do have, more just questions about how that's going to affect, capital budget and
Yeah.
and other things. I don't know if there's like a huge rush to put it forward, but if we can put it forward and then make edits if we need to.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So I'll make a motion to approve the CPA proposal application with the edits we've discussed.
I'll second that.
All right. Do committee members have further discussion? No? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. No one
you.
opposed. All right. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Good presentation.
All right. Thank you all. All right. So,
That way now Mr. Buckland can leave.
yeah. All right. So I would like to
Look
do
it out for
a
you.
brief executive session. So I will make a motion to move into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 23B, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the governing bargaining or litigating position. Also, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, to actually conduct collective bargaining and contract negotiations with non-union personnel. And I do plan to return to open session. We'll take a roll call vote. Danielle?
Staniszewski, aye.
Bench, aye.
Boudreaux, aye.
Engelhardt, aye.
What's the best way to do this, John? Okay.
I'm going to shut off Google Meets.